Hello, everybody. My name is Amy, and today I would like to share a little bit of my knowledge with you guys. Today, I am going to create a video about all the tenses in Spanish. Now, I'm not going to teach you all the tenses because that's actually something that you don't really need for your everyday conversations. But I'm going to give you 10 super important Spanish tenses that you will need for your everyday conversations, okay? So, what I'm going to discuss with you is, first of all, the present tense. Then I'm going to explain to you what verbos reflexivos are. Then we are going to study the gerundio, which is the present progressive. Pretérito perfecto simple, which is commonly known as the simple past. Then there is another past tense, which is the imperfecto. Then there is pretérito perfecto compuesto, which is the present perfect. Then futuro simple, futuro próximo, condicional, and subjuntivo, okay? Maybe all of these different words, they don't mean anything to you and you don't really know how to use that or when to use that or what they even mean. So first of all, I'm going to explain to you what each and every one of these tenses mean. And I am going to show you exactly how and when to use them, okay? Now, there is something called the time markers. The time markers indicate what kind of tense you should be using. For example, if I say today, then you're probably going to use the present tense, right? If I say yesterday, then it's probably the past tense. And then if I say tomorrow, then that would be the future tense. So time markers allow us to know what kind of tense you should be using. So these words will give us cues for us to use each tense. Then I will get into the grammar, the conjugation, and I will explain to you how to conjugate all of these different verbs with a little chart that we have, a little cheat sheet. And I am going to focus on the regular verbs. However, I have so much information on both regular and irregular verbs. So if you want more of that, you can just contact me and I will give you a whole PDF on each and every one of these tenses for both the regular and irregular verbs. So I have everything. And then at the end, there will be examples for each tense, of course. So I'm going to show you exactly how they look like in conversation. And after that, I am going to challenge you and I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. And you are supposed to write down your own examples, things that relate to your actual life. And the way that the reason why I do this is so you can actually create associations to what is it that you actually do every single day. So that will make it easier for you to memorize it because it will be something that will relate to your everyday activities. Well, let's get started and let's start with the present tense. Okay, how and when to use it. You are going to use this tense to talk about what you do regularly, habitually, or right now, but you are not supposed to use it when you want to use the gerundio instead. Gerundio is for things that are happening right at this second, like I'm eating pizza and you literally have a pizza slice on your mouth, right? So it's a little bit more literal in that way. But this talks about facts, routines, states, and general truths. So, for example, on Fridays, I eat pizza, right? So, different from I'm eating pizza right now to on Fridays, I eat pizza, right? So, this talks about routines. The time markers are hoy, normalmente, siempre, todos los días, a veces. So, something that is really cool about this is that you can use it with adverbs of frequency. What are adverbs of frequency? Well, those are the words that tell us when something is happening. So if I say, for example, siempre, which means always, that's something that happens 100% of the time. But then if I use nunca, then that's never, right? And that's something that happens, 0% of the time. And if I use a veces, which is right here, a veces, that's 50% of the time, which, yeah, makes it right in the middle, right, of the chart. So those are adverbs of frequency. Another adverb of frequency that you can see right here, for example, is normally, normalmente. And a cool trick about all of these words is that mente equals li in English. So normally, normalmente. Habitually, habitualmente. Generally, generalmente. Okay, so it's a really cool trick I like to show all my students. Okay, now the conjugation, and again, I'm going to only focus on the regular verbs. Now, what is a regular verb? What is an irregular verb? And first of all, what the heck is a verb? Okay, a verb is an action. So what we do every single day is an actual verb. To eat, to work, to study, to travel, to try, to think. So a lot of these words, they don't necessarily need an action because verbs are also known as action words, but it doesn't always require an action. For example, to exist, it's not really something that you do, you just exist, right? But still, that's a verb. Something that allows you to identify it is by noticing that to at the beginning, right? So to breathe, to study, to work, to try, to run, to jump, all of these are verbs. Now, those are verbs. Now, they are separated into many, many, many different categories, but right now I'm going to focus on regular and irregulars, okay? Now, a regular verb is the kind of verb that follows the rules, the good guys, okay? The guys that don't surprise us. Now, an irregular verb is the kind of guy that just does whatever the heck, and you just don't understand why. It's just so unpredictable. So that's what we call an irregular verb. It's just all over the place, okay? So what I can show you here is a quick example of a regular verb. Let's take trabajar. Maybe you've heard this word before, which is to work. But then let's take ir, which maybe you have heard before as well. But these verbs are completely different because one follows the rules and the other one just does whatever it wants. So, trabajar, if I'm conjugating this verb, by the way, ending with AR, I'm going to make sure that the first word that I use to describe myself, I work, that it ends with an O, okay? You work becomes trabajas with AS. And by the way, we're going to see that breakdown right here. So this one is I. This one is you. This one would be he, she, it. I don't have space for that actually. Let me fix that. I don't know how to fix that because there's not that much space, but we'll make it work. Yes, we will. Okay, so you, then he, she, it. Let's pretend that I put all of that there. Then we have we, and at the very end we have you guys or they, okay? So trabajo ending with O would be I work, okay? Trabajas would be you work. Trabaja would be she or he works or it works. And trabajamos ending with mos would be we work. And at the end, trabajan, that would be they or you guys work, okay? The plural. Now, you guys see all of this breakdown, right? All of these differences. This is what we know in Spanish, as conjugation, okay? All those different changes. Now, in English, we have, for example, a regular verb in English is eat. So I say eat, eats, eat, and eat. So you guys see that it doesn't really change much in English. So that's why in English I need to add I, you, and he, she, it, all of that, and then we, all of these different things. Well, in Spanish, it doesn't work that way. In Spanish, all you need to do is make sure that the ending is correct. And then that alone tells you who is doing the action and when this person is doing the action. So if I have trabajo like this, that already means I work in the present tense, okay? So that's why Spanish can be sometimes a little bit of a mystery to some learners of the language, mostly with English speaking learners, because Romance languages, they all do this. French does this, Italian does this, Portuguese does this, Spanish, and if I'm not mistaken, probably Romanian as well would do it. So all of these different changes, these conjugations, they happen in all those Romance languages. But when it comes to English, then it's quite easy in a way just to conjugate a verb because you just have to add the pronoun at the beginning. So I eat, you eat, blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't really change much. As you can see, the word eat stays the same, almost, right? It just changes for he, she, or it. But in Spanish, again, it's not that way. And because it's not that way, you don't have to say, like Duolingo makes you say, which I hate that about Duolingo. I do support Duolingo, I enjoy Duolingo, but I don't always like it. And that is one of the things because it tells my students, yo trabajo all the time and tú trabajas. If you have really heard two people, two Spanish speakers talking in real life, you have probably heard that they don't really say yo every time that they start a sentence. So that tells you that Duolingo is not really teaching you the right way, right? So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to teach you how to conjugate regular verbs. And again, a regular verb is a good guy. Now let's go back to ir, that I almost forgot about this bad guy. Okay. So, ir, to go. Then for me to say I go or I'm going to say voy. You see how ir and voy, they don't really make any sense? Like trabajar and trabajo, they kind of look alike. So they kind of make sense, right? It kind of follows a rule. There is a pattern there. But the rule here says, well, every time that you see a verb ending with ar, such as trabajar, you're going to add an O. Here we have the O in trabajo. Then why is this ir ending with a Y? There is no rules about that, by the way. It's just an irregular verb. So an irregular verb, it kind of does what it wants. And unfortunately, there is no way for us to know which verb is gonna do what, okay? You just honestly just have to know. So we have vas, we have va, we have vamos, which you've probably heard. Doesn't really mean let's go, by the way. It can be that, but it actually means we go. So that is the difference between a regular verb and an irregular verb. So I'm not going to focus on the regular ones because I want you to have a pattern that's easy to follow for most things, okay? Now, irregular verbs are quite the lot. It's a decent amount of verbs, but I do have separate material for that, which I would be super happy to share with you if you contact me after watching this video. Okay, so let's then begin. So the conjugation for regular verbs, as I said, would be an O if I'm talking about myself, as, or es, a, amos, hemos, imos, and an, en. Now, we have three different options. Why is that? Well, within the regular verbs, we have three different categories of verbs. We have those ending with ar, we have those ending with er, and we have those ending with ir. Trabajar, to work, comer, to eat, and vivir, to live. Okay? So, now you might ask me, when am I going to, how am I going to know which one is ar, or ir? Well, there is no way for us to know exactly which verb is going to end in which way. However, you should know that most verbs in Spanish, they end with ar. I would dare to say around 60% of them. And there is really cool things that will allow you to have access to many of them through the language that you are already speaking, which is English. For example, communicate, ending with ate at the end. If you replace that ate for an ar in Spanish, then you have a verb in Spanish. So comunicar means to communicate, okay? So that is a really cool trick. A lot of the words in English ending with ate, that would be ar in Spanish. So a lot of the verbs in Spanish will end with ar, and we will have some others, of course, with er and ir. So let's do a conjugation real quick. So what we know so far is that we don't need to add anything else at the beginning, like we do in English, is I eat or you eat, because what happens in Spanish is that the ending changes so much that all we really need to know is how the word is going to end, okay, for us to have the cues. Now, if I want to say we work, our cue right here, our ending says amos, okay? So what do? We take out the ending, the ar. We also take out the er and ir, and we replace it with whatever we see here, okay? So we work in the present tense, that would be trabajamos, okay? Now, what would be your guess for we live? If you said vivimos, that's correct. Then we have they eat. Now for the plurals, you are going to add an N, okay, at the very end. So they eat, remember you drop the ending, the ER, and you replace it with whatever we see here, which would be EN, so comen, they eat. I eat would be como, ending with O. Again, you drop the ER and then you replace it with the one letter, right, that we have here. So that's how the conjugation works. Now let's go into some examples. And by the way, I'm only going to explain this once, and this is going to be the general rule for everything else that we see here. So that's the really cool part about understanding regular verbs, that once you got the foundation of it, you're set, okay? Okay, so the examples. Hoy hablo con mis estudiantes. Today I speak with my students. Or I talk to my students as well. Hablar could be either speaking or talking. Normalmente ceno temprano. Now, maybe cenar is not a word that you're familiar with, but cenar means to have dinner. So I normally eat dinner early, temprano. Vivo con mi familia. I live with my family. Okay, so these are the examples for the present tense. Now, I told you that I'm going to give you some homework. So your homework for, practice all these different verbs is going to be talk about three things, right, that relate to your life. So for example, me, I would say, escucho música en las mañanas, which would be I listen to music in the mornings, okay? Estudio ruso en las tardes, which is actually true. I'm studying Russian. I study Russian in the evenings or afternoons. And another one is, let me think. Trying to think of things that are not right here. Escribo en mi diario todos los días. So I write on my journal every single day. Okay, so these are my three sentences. Here I'm focusing on myself, but if I were to say you listen to music, or they listen to music, or we listen to music, this of course would change on all of that, and depending on that ending, right, that I'm focusing. So escuchas, you listened, you listen to music in the mornings. Escucha, she listens to, or he listens to music in the mornings. Escuchamos, we listen to music in the morning, and escuchan, they listen to music in the morning, okay? So that's how that's gonna work, okay? But here I'm going to suggest that you talk about yourself first, so you get familiarized with that whole concept, okay? Now, if you're a little bit more advanced, probably the present tense is pretty easy for you at this point. So just have fun and create longer, more complex sentences, okay? And yeah, challenge yourself, okay? Use many different adverbs and add a place, add a time. That's how you add a little bit more of difficulty to all of these different examples, okay? All these different exercises. Now, reflexive verbs. Reflexive verbs, how and when to use it. Use when the subject does the action to themselves. Daily routines, body actions, emotions, and personal care. Verbs are usually reflexive, okay? Okay, so this whole concept, this whole concept is quite interesting to a lot of my students because they do get confused, okay? Now, there is, like I said earlier, there are many different types of verbs. Now, one kind of verb that we're going to study today which are quite common in everyday conversations, is the reflexive verbs. Okay, the reflexive verbs are quite necessary actually. So that's why I would like to introduce them to you and tell you how they work. Okay, so something that we can do to ourselves. Think about it. What are actions that you could do to yourself? Well, I think that showering is something that you do to yourself, right? Washing your own hands, brushing your own teeth, brushing your own hair, putting makeup on yourself, putting clothes on yourself. All of these things are not something that you really see that way as an English speaker, but in Spanish, we created this whole section of verbs that are known as the reflexive verbs, which are, again, the actions that we do to ourselves. Okay, so a lot of our daily routines have to do with this. Like I mentioned, showering, putting clothes on, brushing your teeth. Also, waking yourself up in the morning, getting up. All of this are things that we do to ourselves. Okay, so how do we recognize these verbs? First of all, well, remember how those other verbs they ended with ar, er, ir? Well, these guys are the same. The only thing that we need to add at the end is the se. So right here, that's what tells us that is a reflexive verb. Okay, levantarse. Another one, like I mentioned, taking a shower, bañarse. And another one that we have would be maquillarse. And a lot of them, like I said, a lot of Spanish verbs, they end with ar. Okay, so these are our reflexive verbs. Now, time markers, por la mañana, in the morning, por la noche, at night, and todos los días, every day, okay? Actually, the time markers for both the reflexive verbs and the present tense are the same, okay? So you don't have to worry too much about the time markers being every single time, like completely different. There are time markers that we can use for more than one tense, okay? Now, the structure. The structure is what we already learned, this exact thing. The only thing that we need to add to it is these guys right here at the very beginning. Okay, so remember how I said that these actions are something that you do to yourself? Well, you are going to, in a way, reaffirm that. Okay, so levantarse again means to wake oneself up. So if you are waking yourself up, you would start with me and then with your regular conjugation, which is if the verb is ar, then you're gonna take out this whole ending and you're just gonna put an O like this, okay? So, levanto, okay? But since you're doing it to yourself, then me levanto. I wake myself up, okay? Now, if it's you, te, and then again, we're still in an AR ending verb, you would say te levantas, okay? For she wakes herself, sorry, she gets up. She gets herself up would be se levanta. We wake ourselves up. I'm sorry, I keep saying wake, but this is more like getting up. Nos levantamos. We get ourselves up. And se levantan. They get themselves up. Okay, so nos levantamos and se levantan. Okay, so again, as you can see, this is what we already learned earlier in terms of like the ending. Okay, this is all the same. This is everything that we already learned with the other conjugations. Now, what changes in order for us to make it a reflexive verb, you just have to reaffirm, okay, that you're doing it to yourself. Me levanto, te levantas, se levanta, nos levantamos, and se levanta, okay? So that makes it, I'm doing this action to myself, okay? Now, you might ask me, well, can I just say levanto? Yes, you can, but it would not mean I get myself up in the morning, okay? So if you want to say I wake up at 6, you would say me levanto a las 6. But a las 6 a.m., for example. Me levanto a las 6 a.m. But if you were to just say, you know what, this is silly, I'm not going to use the me, and you just say levanto a las 6 a.m., levanto actually means to lift, to pick something up, okay? While me levanto means to get up in the morning, to wake up in a way. So levanto and me levanto are completely different. So this is why the whole concept of reflexive verbs is actually important, okay? Same with the word me baño, which would be I shower myself or I bathe myself. If you just say baño, you probably know that this just means bathroom, right? So, or it could also be to bathe someone else. But if you don't put the me baño, then it wouldn't mean I am showering myself, okay? So if you want to say me baño todos los días, I shower every day, again, you would have to add this for us to know that it's I shower. If you don't put it there, if you don't add it, it would be like saying shower every day. Like, I don't know who's doing the action, right? If you just say shower every day. It could be maybe like, hey, you should shower every day, right? Like shower every day. But for the most part, in English, we also need that extra thing, right? So you shower, or they shower, or I shower, right? So you would need the me for it to specify that it is being an action that you're doing to yourself, okay? Now, me baño todos los días. Awesome. So, another question that you might have is, okay, why isn't it me trabajo? Okay, think about it. Certain actions you cannot do to yourself, like we shower ourselves, right? Or like we put makeup on ourselves, or as we wash our hands, right? Again, it's a body action, it's a daily routine, it's something that you do to yourself. But yeah, sure, trabajar is a daily routine, but it's not a self-action, okay? You just say trabajo. There are many, many things that are not going to be reflexive, and that's why you won't see me all the time in our verbs, right? So when you see the me, it's possibly a reflexive verb. Now, why am I saying possibly? Well, it could also be a verb such as me gusta, which actually doesn't have anything to do with reflexive verbs. Me gusta doesn't really mean I like. If I were to translate it word by word, it would be more like me, it pleases. So it means more like it pleases me. So me gusta la pizza would be the pizza pleases me, okay? So not every time that you see a me is going to be a reflexive verb, but a lot of them are going to be actions that you do to yourself, okay? And again, if they don't have the me, then they are not a reflexive verb. Okay, so that is the conjugation. And again, you pretty much have the exact same rules that we do up here, the exact same ones. Now, the difference is that you are going to put that me, te, se, nos, and se according to who does the action to themselves, right? Now, it is also possible to do all these actions to someone else, right? So you could say te levanto, for example, and that would be you, I wake up, right? I get up. So, have you ever heard te amo or te quiero? Well, in Spanish, we do things backwards. Te amo is you, I love. Te quiero is pretty similar as well. Te quiero is a little bit less than love. This is more like passionate family, or could also be like super romantic love, right? Te quiero, this could be with friends or something like that. So lots of love for like people that we really, really care about. But the structure is you, I love, and you, I love as well, or you, I care about, for example. So the same thing applies here. Te levanto. You, I get up or I wake up. Okay, so these actions you can do to someone else as well. But if you're talking about yourself doing these actions, then you do this. Me levanto. Again, so repeating that me, implying that it is something that is done to you, to yourself, to your own self. Okay. Now, let's get into all these examples that are written down. Todos los días me levanto a las 7. Every single day, I wake up at 7. Por la noche te bañas antes de dormir. At night, you shower before sleeping, before going to bed. And nos acostamos a las 10. We lay down or we go to bed at 10. Acostarse is to lay down or to go to bed. So these are the roots of the verbs. Levantarse and acostarse and bañarse. Now, if I say the root, it means the word before being conjugated. The word before it tells me who does the action, okay? All right. Gerundio. Gerundio is the present progressive, when to do an action. So how and when to use it. Sorry, I don't know what I was saying there. So gerundio is present progressive when the action is being done right at that second, okay? How and when to use it. Used to describe actions happening right now in this exact moment or ongoing temporary actions, okay? Time markers, ahora, now, ahora mismo, right now, en este momento, at this moment, and actualmente, currently, okay? Actualmente, I know it could be actually because of the rule that I told you earlier, but this is an exception, okay? So actualmente doesn't mean actually. It does not mean actually, it means currently. Now, how do we say actually? We say de hecho. De hecho, which is quite similar to in fact, okay? In fact, actually, de hecho. Okay, so actualmente, currently. Now, how do we create this? Okay, so if you have an ar ending verb, you're gonna add an ando. And if you have an er ending verb, ir ending verb, we have the same ending, which is yendo. Okay, so let's go back to the verbs that we've been working with. Trabajar, comer, and vivir. And we also have reflexive verbs. So let's use bañarse as well. And levantarse. Okay, so trabajar would be the AR, you would also drop it, and you would add ando. So then trabajar means to work, but trabajando means working, okay? So the gerundio is the ing, okay? All those things that are happening right now. Comer, we drop the ER and we put the the IENDO, which is yendo in Spanish. So that would become comiendo, eating. And then we have vivir, which is to live. And to make it living, we would say viviendo. Okay? So showering would be bañando. Okay? And getting up would be levantando. Okay? Okay, so this is how you would, and by the way, we're gonna ignore the sit for a little bit. We're not gonna think about the sit at the second. Forget about it. Okay, so now let's read the examples. Ahora mismo estoy hablando con mi amiga. Right now, I am talking to my friend. En este momento estoy viendo una película. At this moment, I am watching a movie. And actualmente estoy viviendo en Budapest. Currently, I am living in Budapest. Okay? So I'm going to challenge you now to create 3 sentences with the ing, okay? So, for example, I'm going to use a couple of reflexive verbs, and I'm going to also use the regular verbs, okay, as well. So, for example, I'm going to say, estoy enseñando español. I am teaching Spanish. Oh, ahora. I am teaching Spanish ahora, okay? And enseñar is the word for teach, okay? So, estoy enseñando español ahora. I am teaching Spanish now. I am taking a shower. Me estoy bañando. I am taking a shower. And what else? Estoy escribiendo un poema. I am writing a poem, which comes from escribir, which is to write, and bañarse right here, which is to take a shower, right? Or to bathe oneself. Okay, so we've got enseñar, bañarse, and escribir. Okay, so maybe you noticed that I am using estoy. What does estoy mean? Okay, estoy means I am. So if I say I am teaching, then I would first use estoy and then the word teaching. Because what would happen if I just say trabajando ahora? Working now. I mean, of course, if you're texting someone and they just reply working now, then that means, oh, they're working, they're busy, right? But if you want to specify who's doing the action, you would say estoy trabajando ahora, right? I am working now. So what I'm just saying here is that sometimes just not giving any context is not gonna work, okay? You need to give some context. For example, if you just say showering now, that would also be like, what? Okay, so you need to add context, okay? And the estoy, which is I am, tells us who's doing the action, which in this case, of course, is I am. Estás would be you are. For example, ¿cómo estás? How are you? And está, she is, and estamos, we are, and están, they are. Okay, so estoy estudiando, I am studying. Estás trabajando, you are working. Está viendo, he is watching, or she is watching. Estamos, estamos comiendo, we're eating, and están tomando agua, they are drinking water. Okay, let's continue now. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to give you some time for you to create your own sentences with this. Okay, let's continue. Pretérito perfecto simple. Pretérito perfecto simple, okay? So this is the past tense. The past tense, that is the simple one, okay? And why do they call it the simple one? Well, we use this tense to describe completed actions in the past with a clear beginning and an end, usually tied to a specific moment in time. Time markers. Ayer, anoche, la semana pasada, el mes pasado, el año pasado, en 1999, en 1988, en 2001, en 2003. Okay? So the time markers are, like I said, the cues for us to know when to use what tense. Okay? So yesterday, last night, last week, last month, last year, and in 1999. Okay? So this, if you take a quick look at it, if you really think about it, it does give me a clear beginning and an end, right? I know when this action happened. Now, the most important thing, the most important, let's call it requirement about using this tense is that this action needs to be completed for it to belong to the past simple. Okay, now the conjugation. The really cool thing about this is that whatever applies to the ar, to the er ending verb, it also applies to the ir ending verb. So it's only separated into two categories here. Okay, so we've got for I did an action in the past, or y. Okay, so again, if we have comer and trabajar, that means that I would change my ending, my AR ending, to E. So, trabajé. Okay? Comer would be comí, and vivir would be viví. Okay? And now this accent right here, it's very, very, very important because that's going to make it sound quite different if you say vivi, for example. And vivi also sounds more like a name rather than the verb. So viví would be I lived, and Vivi is more like short for Viviana, which is a name in Mexico. So important to make sure that you are emphasizing those words that have an accent. And the past tense always has an accent, okay? So let's continue. Then ar says that for you, I'm going to say haste. So you worked in the past becomes trabajaste, okay? He worked or she worked would be trabajó. And they worked would be trabajaron, okay? So let's do comiste, comió, oh, what am I doing? Oh yeah, I missed trabajamos here. Sorry about that. And there we go. Comí, comiste, comió, comimos, yeah, mira. Perfect. And viví, viviste, vivió, vivimos, and vivieron, right? So, guys, this is how this works, okay? If you have an AR ending verb, you just drop the ending, the AR, and then it becomes all these different variations. And remember, the reason why we have so many different variations is so you don't have to say yo all the time, or tú all the time, or nosotros all the time, because this already tells me that it's always going to have an e like this, okay? So trabajé already means I worked in the past. So if I say ayer trabajé, that's yesterday I worked, okay? I don't need to say ayer yo trabajé. Again, the ending does that. The ending explains all of that. It explains who is doing the action and when that action was done, okay? The e, like that with the accent, explains that it's a past action, okay? An action that was completed. Now, okay, we have ayer hablé con mi mamá. Anoche compré unos tacos and el año pasado viví en otro país. Yesterday I talked or spoke to my mom. Anoche compré unos tacos. Last night I bought some tacos. And last year I lived in a different country. Okay? Awesome. So again, I'm going to challenge you to create your own sentences here. I would say la semana pasada. La semana pasada escuché una canción nueva. Mm, Anoche me viste por 30 minutos. And el mes pasado compré, no lo sé, compré un vestido nuevo. ¿Qué? So, la semana pasada escuché una canción nueva. Last week I listened to a new song. Anoche medité por 30 minutos. Last night I meditated for 30 minutes. And last month I bought a new dress. Okay? Okay, so then I'm going to allow you to create your own sentences. So then we can continue with more tenses here. So far, we have 4, and I know that it can feel like a lot, but remember, you can always pause this video wherever you need, and you can refer back to this for references, of course. Okay, let's clear all this mess for now. Now let's continue with the imperfecto. How and when to use the imperfecto. Used for ongoing past actions, repeated habits, descriptions, childhood memories, and things you used to do, okay? So this is how it's different from the simple past. The simple past just focuses on those things that were already completed, actions that started and that ended. But this, for example, if I say, I used to eat, that doesn't necessarily tell you that the action in a way is completed, right? I mean, it happened and there was time in which you did that action, right? It happened for a while. It was an ongoing past action. Okay, it was also a habit in the past. So for example, when I was living in Italy, I used to eat pizza every single weekend. So that is something that tells me that happened more than once. It's a repeated habit. But if I say yesterday I ate pizza, then that tells me that it's an action that ended. So the imperfecto works for all those stories. They used to, things that you used to do before. So some of the time markers are before, cuando era niño, meaning when I was a child, when I was a kid, siempre, which is also always, and it was also used for the present tense. And then frecuentemente, frequently, okay? Something that happens with this is that you can translate it as used to or would. For example, I would always do this. When I was living in Italy, I would always eat pizza with my friends, right? So it can be translated as used to or would, depending on how you use it, of course, as long as it's that kind of ongoing past action and repeated habit. Now, the conjugation, again, we are separating the verbs only into 2, those with AR ending and those with ER and IR endings. So that means that I'm not going to focus too much on separating these 2. These ones are the same, okay? So whatever applies to ER also applies to IR. Okay, so let's take again the same verbs that we've been working with. Trabajar, comer, and vivir. Okay, so trabajar. I used to work, and we're gonna focus on the first one, meaning I. Then this would be you, he, she, it, we, and they. So I used to work would be trabajaba. Trabajaba. There we go. Okay, and then you used to work. We would just add an S to it, and that would be trabajabas. okay? For she, we would just take out that S. Also for he, right? She and he are pretty much the same thing in terms of conjugation. And trabajamos, trabajábamos, sorry. Oh my God, what am I? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Trabajabas, trabajabas, trabajaba, trabajábamos, trabajábamos, and trabajaban, okay? So these are all the different conjugations that we're gonna have for this. Oh, it won't fit in there. So maybe I can do this. Right, guys, I'm a little bit all over the place. Sorry about that. Nope, it did not work. Okay, so I'm just gonna put it up here. So, these would be the conjugations for the conjugation for work, for working. So then we have I used to work, you used to work, he or she used to work, we used to work, and they used to work. Okay. Now comer, we drop again, we drop the ER ending, the IR ending, the AR ending, all of that, and then we adjust it accordingly. So it would be comía and vivía. It would be comías and vivías. Comía and vivía. Comíamos and vivíamos. And vivían, or they. Comíamos and comían. Perfect. Okay, so that is I used to eat and you used, or I used to live, you used to eat, you used to live, and so on. Okay, so this is how we're gonna use it. We're gonna use it for all those things that happen at a certain point in our lives, right? So, for example, when I was a child, when I was a kid, when I was like a little girl, I used to speak a lot. I used to talk a lot. Hablaba mucho. Antes, before, comía más dulces. I used to eat more sweets. Dulces is either candy or sweets. And siempre vivíamos cerca del mar. We would always live near the sea, or we always used to live near the sea. So this is something that is going to help you to talk about stories, right? Things that happen at a certain time in your life. For example, when you were going to college, when you were living in a different country, when you were living in a different state, when you were a teenager, when you were a child, right? All of these different things use the this tense, the used to, okay? So, cuando era niña, hablaba mucho. Okay, so I'm going to give you more examples for you to probably get this whole thing a little bit better. Allow me to clean all of this because it's messy. Okay, let's clean it. And okay, now let's talk about my examples. Cuando vivía en Budapest, mm, Budapest, and I'm going to use now the verb tener, which is to have. So that is to have. So then I'm gonna make it an imperfecto by doing this. Cuando vivía en Budapest tenía muchos amigos italianos. There were a lot of Italians in Budapest for some reason. Okay, so when I used to live, or when I was living in Budapest, or when I would live in Budapest, I used to have a lot of Italian friends. So as you can see, this works more as when I used to live or when I was living in Budapest, right? Not so much as when I would live in Budapest. So sometimes it's going to be translated in different ways. And why does this happen? Because this doesn't really exist in English. So that's why it just changes depending on how we are telling that story. And now I have a little bit of an awkward confession to make. So I'm gonna talk about those reflexive verbs again. We can use it with this as well, as long as we are adding the respective pronoun. So again, if it's about myself, I'm gonna use me. So for example, cuando vivía en, say, Praga, it was so cold in there. Me bañaba cada 2 días. So when I was living in Prague, or when I used to live in Prague, I would shower every 2 days. I wouldn't shower every single day. I would shower every 2 days. Kind of. I think I was showering every day, but here and there I would do it every 2 days. It was so cold. It was wintertime, so no shame there. But yeah, I wanted to show you guys how that reflexive verb would look like with imperfecto. And for example, yesterday I showered. That would be ayer me bañé. So the imperfecto works as any other verb as long as you add your reflexive pronoun at the beginning. And what is the reflexive pronoun? We talked about it. That would be me for I, te for you, se for he, she, it, nos for we, and se for they or you guys for the plural. Okay? So as long as you're doing that, you are going to be able to use any sort of tense with the reflexive verbs. Okay? So when I was living in Prague, I used to shower every 2 days. Okay, and now let's say antes estudiaba mucho, pero ahora no tengo tiempo. I used to study a lot, but now I don't have time. Okay, so notice how this whole tense talks about the past, but in a very different way as the simple past. Again, the simple past is, I called you yesterday. I played chess for 3 hours, things like that. So there are more precise things in which we use the simple past with. Now, when it comes to the imperfecto, we are focusing more on like stories, okay? More about things that used to happen in our lives. And why is this important? Why is this something that we use in everyday situations? Well, you can also talk about things that, for example, that were kind of like the background, kind of like the context of the situation. So what I mean with that is, estaba en mi casa y después salí porque escuché un ruido. Now, this talks about what I was doing at the time, like the ongoing past action. I was at home, and later I left or I went out because I listened to a noise. So, después salí porque escuché un ruido. As you guys can see, this is an action that had a clear beginning and an ending. Now, estaba en mi casa describes the context. It tells me what was happening. It kind of gives me a description of the environment, of the situation. But then the past tense, the simple past tense, tells me what were the actions that happened subsequently, right after that. Okay, so for example, another thing that I can think of for this would be escuchaba música cuando empezó a llover. I was listening to music when it started to rain. So again, it describes the situation, what was happening. And then suddenly it started to rain. So that's how the simple past tense um, uh, different is different to the imperfecto tense. Okay. Again, this is more like all of a sudden this happened. And this is, well, I was doing this thing and then something happened. What else could be there? we can also use the ing. Estaba comiendo. Estaba comiendo cuando llegó mi mamá. I was eating when my mom arrived. So there are many, 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 many uses for this imperfecto tense. One of the main ones is describing the context, giving me a little bit more of like the background, describing the environment. It is so common for little stories, for like children's books and stuff like that. Once upon a time, there lived a very brave knight who had a beautiful shiny armor, right? So that kind of thing, that kind of story is usually going to be narrated in the perfecto tense. So hope that helps. One last use that I can think for the imperfecto is two things happening simultaneously. So, escuchaba música mientras mi mamá hablaba por teléfono. So I was listening to music while my mom was speaking on the phone. So this mientras means while. So two things happening simultaneously. That's how that works, okay? So that's another use that I can think of for the imperfecto. It's a great tense and you're probably gonna see it quite a lot. So I would really recommend getting more into it and yeah, create again your own sentences for you to be more familiarized with this. So three uses, well, more uses than that, but let's go with the main ones that it talks about in here. I'm going to delete this. Okay, so three uses would be well, going past actions, repeated habits, descriptions, their childhood memories, things you used to do. That's one. Although that is like one thing. Another thing is that kind of description that I was giving you in the sense of like what was the context, what was happening while this other thing happened. And then the ing, right? I was doing this when this other thing happened. Um, the simultaneous actions, right? So those are a couple of examples that I can give you, a couple of um, how do you say, like yeah, requirements for it to be used. Okay, so we are getting into more advanced sort of sentences and also more complex sort of tenses. The pretérito perfecto compuesto, it is very used as well for all those things that happened very recently or that are connected to today, this week, or this month. Also used for life experiences. This is also a past tense, but it is different because these actions are connected to today. So for example, I have been working a lot this week. I have studied a lot this morning. I have worked a lot like this month, for example. So if I say I have worked a lot this month, that means that in the past you were working, but that till this day you are still working, right? So that is how these actions are different from the other two, from the other past tenses, because these are things that still carry a relevance to the present moment. And in English, this is known as the present perfect. Okay, and also all of these things, except for maybe the reflexive and imperfecto, but still there are ways for us to translate those sentences to English. It's because even though they are not specifically used the way we use them, um, they also exist, right? All of these things also exist in English. So this one is going to be slightly easier than explaining the imperfecto. because this actually is something that you use a lot in English. Now, the time markers, hoy, esta semana, este mes, últimamente, siempre, nunca, alguna vez. Today, this week, this month, lately, not ultimately. This does not mean ultimately, lately, always, never, and ever, like have you ever. Now, the formation. There are two elements to this. So, for example, if I say, I have worked, I have studied, I have gone, I have eaten, I have thought, right? All of this is in the same as Spanish, meaning that we have two verbs that will work together to create this tense. So the first thing that we need for this in Spanish is a verb called haber. Now, haber is kind of like the have here, but important to know, haber does not mean to have. Haber is more like to exist. Okay? It's one of like the vague translations because it doesn't really exist in English. But the way that we use it is very similar to the way that you guys use have in English for this kind of structure. So for example, I have worked a lot this week. I have studied a lot this month, right? I have gone or I have never gone to that place. I have eaten a lot of fruits today. I have taught in different schools. So this is how we use it. So e would be have, but for I, right? Then as would be also have, but for you, would be actually has. Hemos would be have, and an would be have. Sorry, and would be have. Okay, so if I want to say I have done something, I would say you have done something. It would be as. She has done something. This would be kind of backwards, right? This would be a, and hemos, we have done something, and an, they have done something, okay? So they on their own, they don't tell us anything because this is an auxiliary verb. So for example, if I ask the question, you like pizza? And then I say, do you like pizza? What does the do there? Like, what does do like mean here? On its own, it doesn't really mean anything. Like, it's not like saying I do the bed every morning or I do yoga, right? It doesn't have the same kind of meaning. But this do is known as an auxiliary verb, meaning that this only helps the sentence be a question because we can totally say you like pizza, but we know that the proper thing to ask is, do you like pizza? So the do here doesn't really have a meaning on its own. It's just an auxiliary verb. It creates more harmony in the question, right? So that's why these guys right here on their own, they don't really mean anything. They need to have a verb for them to actually be something. So also if you say I worked, it's quite different to saying I have worked or I eaten. You cannot even say I eaten. That's wrong. You would need to say I have eaten, right? Or I taught, like this. You can totally say that. It works with some, for example, I gone, you cannot say that. So here and there, you will be able to use these ones without the have, but the present perfect needs to have these two elements for it to work. Okay, you cannot use one without the other. So in Spanish, it's the exact same thing. So let's take out, oh, no, let's not do that. Technology is so funny sometimes. Such an interesting thing. Okay, so that means to exist, and I don't know why it's doing that, but let me try that again. Let me see. Nope. Weird, huh? Really weird. Anyway, let's let's do it again. Doesn't matter. So we have as hemos and an. Yeah. So that is the first part. Now the second part is called the past participle. The past participle in Spanish is when we change the word into these endings, ado, ido, and ido, okay? So if we have an ar ending, it's gonna be ado. If it's or ir, what applies to also applies to ir, which is really fortunate, really cool. It's ido, okay? Now, the past participle in English, I can give you an example. For example, we have eat, ate, and eaten. The latter, the last one, is going to be the past participle of eat, eaten. Then we have to go, went, and gone. Then we also have some regular ones, meaning to study, studied, and studied. Regular means that it's not going to change, okay? And then we have break, broke, broken. Okay, so again, the latter is the past participle. So how does that work in Spanish? So if you have a verb that is ar, let's again use the same ones we've been working with, then that means that this is going to become trabajado, comido, and vivido. So if you want to say I have, you're going to say e. You have, you're going to say as. She has, you're going to say a. And we have, we're going to say hemos, and they have, you're going to say an. Important, by the way, do not pronounce the H. In Spanish, the H is silent, okay? So this is not he or he. This is going to be e, just e. Okay, and remember, again, this doesn't really mean have. It's just the auxiliary verb, okay? Just the helper of the word. So haber is closer in meaning to exist than it is to have, okay? So again, on its own, it doesn't really mean anything. It just helps us create this whole tense. Just like English would need I have eaten for it to have a meaning instead of I eaten, right? That's not correct English, okay? So same thing here happens in Spanish. Okay, so if I want to say I have worked, you would say he trabajado. If you want to say I have worked very hard this week, you would say he trabajado muy duro esta semana. Okay, so I'm just going to put it here. Trabajado muy duro esta semana. Okay, so that's how we do that. Now, you have worked a lot this week. Has trabajado muy duro. Has trabajado mucho esta semana. She has worked a lot this week. Ha trabajado mucho esta semana. We have worked a lot this week. Hemos trabajado mucho esta semana. And they have worked a lot this week. Han trabajado mucho esta semana. Now, we can also add our time markers. And this is what makes it more interesting, right? We could say esta semana. We could also say siempre, which is always. We could say never. Oh, sorry. We could say nunca, which is never, or we could say alguna vez, which is have you ever. So I could ask you, have you ever worked? ¿Alguna vez has trabajado? Have you ever worked? Now let's use eaten. ¿Alguna vez has comido sushi? Have you ever eaten sushi? Never. I have never eaten sushi. Nunca he comido sushi. And now you might ask me, Amy, can I say comido he or he nunca comido? No, you can't. You can only put these two elements together. Okay? So it would be saying like always have always eaten. Like, well, actually that could work. I have always eaten. But always have I eaten. In English, you can actually do this, which is kind of Yoda-like. I'm not such a fan of those structures. But in Spanish, you cannot say that. You cannot say he comido nunca, like that. You would have to say nunca comido, okay? So in terms of structure, Spanish would have the adverb of frequency first, okay? Nunca he comido. Or siempre he comido. Comido siempre, I guess here and there it could work, but the best thing to do is just to keep it at the beginning, okay? So let's go with the examples. ¿Alguna vez has hablado con ella? Have you ever talked to her? Esta semana hemos viajado mucho. This week we have traveled a lot. And este año he estudiado español todos los días. This year I have studied Spanish every single day, or every day, okay? So again, let's do a couple of sentences here. I'm going to say he pensado mucho en viajar este año. I have I have thought a lot about traveling this year. He pensado mucho en viajar este año. He, he tomado vino esta semana. I have drunk wine this week. And nunca he vivido en Italia. I have never lived in Italy. So this would be my 3 sentences. I will now challenge you to create your own, to come up with your own examples. And again, if you want to add a little bit more of difficulty, make sure that you're adding a place, a time, your frequency adverbs, your adverbs of frequency and all of that. So that way you create more complex sentences, okay? Now, again, the reflexive verbs can always be used for this kind of thing. So, no me he bañado hoy. So I'm gonna give you 3 seconds for you to guess what that means. So no, of course, means not or don't. Me is myself. He bañado would be have bathed or have showered in today, okay? Hoy. So I have not showered today. No me he bañado hoy, which is a lie. I actually have showered today. Now, that is how you can use also the reflexive verbs for this, okay? So the structure would be, if it's a negative sentence, you're always gonna put your no at the beginning. And if it's an adverb of frequency, siempre me he bañado en las mañanas, for example. I have always showered in the mornings. So you're gonna put your adverb of frequency first, then your reflexive pronoun, and then your present perfect structure. and then the time, right? So, siempre me he bañado en las mañanas. O nunca me he bañado en las mañanas. I have never showered in the mornings, right? Or sometimes, a veces, me he bañado en las mañanas, okay? So that's how that works. So again, I'm going to challenge you just to create and come up with your own examples, okay? However you please. So we're almost done here with all of our sentences. We are just going to continue with the future now. How we want to use it. Used to talk about predictions, future plans, promises, or things you believe that will happen. Okay, time markers, mañana, pasado mañana, en el futuro, el próximo año. Okay, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, in the future, next year, anything that has not happened, right? So it could also be en enero, right? In January, like something that will happen later. A quick thing about the months of the year in Spanish. We do not capitalize the months of the year. We do not capitalize the days of the week. We do not capitalize nationalities. We do capitalize countries. We do capitalize planets. We do capitalize names, of course, and establishments such as Walmart and all those different places, Bed Bath and Beyond. Not that I have ever gone there, but all of those things would definitely be capitalized also in Spanish. So, but yeah, months of the year we do not capitalize. A lot of my students ask me about that. Okay, so the conjugation, this is a really cool thing about the future, is that you're just going to use any, like you're going to use these endings for any of the um for any of the verbs, okay? So let's go with our chosen ones. So trabajar, comer, and vivir. Now, what happens with the future tense is that you're not going to do anything to this. Okay, you're not going to take out any letters. You're going to leave it the way it is. Now, what you're going to do is that you're going to add these letters, okay? So, trabajar, to work, but trabajaré, I will work. Trabajarás, you will work. Trabajará, he or she will work. Then trabajaremos, we will work, and trabajarán, they will work. Okay, so this is how that works, and it fit. Yes, it did. Okay, comere, I will eat. Comerás, you will eat. Comerá, she, he, it will eat. Comeremos, we will eat, and comerán, they will eat. Okay, so there we go. Perfect. And same with vivir. Viviré, I will live. Vivirás, you will live. Vivirá, she will live. They will live. Viviremos and vivirán. They will live. Okay, or you guys will live. Perfect. All right. So, that is the conjugation for the regular verbs. And we have our examples. ¿Hablarás con ellos? Will you speak? Will you talk to them? La próxima semana compraré una bicicleta. Next week, I am going to buy a bicycle. En el próximo año viviré en México. The next year, I'll live in Mexico. Okay, so you've got el próximo año, la próxima semana, what else? Próximo día, like the next day, right? So this is how you can use the future. Now, when do we use the future? We use it for future plans, we use it for predictions, we use it for promises, right? So that's how we use this tense. And okay, now my three sentences would be comeré sushi mañana. Remember that ir, which was a pain in the butt for the present tense? Well, here it's very easy. You just say iré, and that means I will go. Iré a, iré a la Ciudad de México en enero. Iré a la Ciudad de México en enero. I will go to Mexico City in January. And mandaré un mensaje en la mañana. I will send a message in the morning. Mandar means to send. And mandaré, I will send. Okay, so I will send a message in the morning. Awesome. Okay, so that is the future tense. It is actually quite easy. It's probably one of the easiest tenses that we have. It's really, really, really easy. Okay, so and it gets even easier. It gets even easier when we are using el futuro próximo, the near future. You could say ir a and also the infinitive. Okay, so how and when to use it? Okay, use for things you are definitely going to do very soon or plans already on the way. Okay, time markers pronto, en unos minutos, esta noche, en un momento. Okay, so voy a would be I am going to. Vas a, you're going to. Va a, she or he is going to. Vamos a, we're going to. And van a, they are going to. So this is very, very, very similar to what we have in English. I am going to work tomorrow. I'm going to send you a message. In a minute, I'm going to see you. I'm going to see you in a minute, for example. So, futuro próximo is used for all those actions that are very, very near, right? This is not like a promise about what's going to happen in 10 years, right? This is more about something that is closer to happening now. So, some examples that we have. Esta noche voy a hablar con mis padres. Tonight I'm going to talk to my parents. En unos minutos vamos a comer. We're going to eat in a couple of minutes. Or in a couple of minutes we're going to eat. En pronto voy a vivir en un departamento nuevo. Soon I'm going to live in a new apartment. So here I'm using voy a, but then I also have vamos a, okay? So the way that we do this is that first of all, we're going to use any of these verbs, any of these variations of the verb ir, which means to go. And then I'm going to add the verb, okay? And the verb as well, it doesn't change. So I can just say voy a trabajar, and that means I'm going to work. So that's the really cool thing, that the verb stays the exact same. Nothing changes there. Therefore, voy a comer is I'm going to eat. Vas a vivir, you're going to live. Vamos a vivir, we're going to live, right? So you can play with these ones as much as you want. And the verbs, they stay the same. So any verb, any verb that you want to use, you can just use its natural form. You can use the how do I say the infinitive, the root word. So that's the really cool thing about using this kind of future. It's very, very easy. A lot of my students, they completely ignore the first future tense that we were learning, the futuro simple, because in fact, futuro próximo is way more simple. So this one is easier to use because you don't really have to conjugate other than just adding voy a, right, for most of the sentences. If you're talking about yourself, of course. So, okay, voy a pensar. I'm going to think. Oh. Now, what happens with our reflexive verbs here? Okay, so we have bañarse as a root. Well, with the futuro próximo, this would become voy a bañar, but not se. Here, if you're gonna do it to yourself, you're gonna say voy a bañar, okay? So that's how you know who's doing the action. So voy a bañarme. Okay, she is going to shower herself. Va a bañarse. And again, this is just she's going to shower. Doesn't have to be herself, right? But that's how it works in Spanish. We are going to shower, bathe ourselves. Vamos a bañarnos. And so on. So, vas a bañarte. Bañarse, vamos a bañar. Y van a bañarse as well. Okay, so he, she, it, and you guys and they, because it's the same pretty much. Okay, so that's how it works with the reflexive verbs for the futuro próximo. So hoping this is all coming together. As you know, of course, I'm going to ask you to create your own sentences for this, so you can just get more familiar with these different structures, all these different tenses and how to use them. Of course, another thing that is really, really helpful, once more, is that you focus on those things that are heavily related to the things that you actually do. I don't want you to use a tense that is completely foreign to you, right? Like if there are activities that you never do, then don't talk about them, right? Like because you would not be associating that to your actual life. And that's what I want you to do, because that way you're going to memorize all of these things, because at the end of the day, it is your own life that you're describing here. So make sure that it is as authentically close to what is it that you actually do every single day. And now the conditional, which in English would be would, is something that we use to express or talk about hypothetical or dream situations, also to express polite requests or things you would do if, okay? So that's how and when to use it. And the would be in English, for example, I would like, I would live, I would travel, okay? So all of this is the conditional in Spanish. Now, something that we also use the conditional for, as we can see here, is a polite request. Would it be possible to, or would you please, would you mind, blah, 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 right? So all of this is to ask for something in a polite way, okay? So that is something that we use a lot in Spanish. And that's why the conditional is something that you should definitely learn and become familiar with. So the time markers are si pudiera, si tuviera, si fuera posible, idealmente, okay? And the way that we are going to use it is also really, really cool, because you are going to only use the infinitive verb, which is, the verb in its natural form, trabajar, comer, vivir. And you're going to add the ending, okay? So I would work would be trabajaría. Okay, you would work, trabajarías, she would work, trabajaría, we would work, trabajaríamos, they would work, trabajarían. Comer, I would eat, comería. Comerías, comería, comeríamos, comerían, okay? And vivir, you would live, sorry, I would live, viviría, vivirías, viviría, viviríamos, vivirían, okay? So that's how you're going to use the conditional. And for example, this is something that you could possibly say if you were to ask for the bill. You can totally just say la cuenta, por favor, and that's 100% acceptable. That's perfect if that's what you're using already. But if you want to add more Spanish to your Spanish and even sound more polite when you ask for something, this is something that we use a lot in Mexico. Sería posible. Would it be possible to? Would it be possible to ask you for another napkin? Maybe it's a little bit too much in the culture, the American culture or Canadian culture, but this is something that happens a lot in Spanish, okay, in Mexican culture. Would it be possible to What's another thing? Could you please, right? That's podría pedirte la cuenta. That's another one. So podría comes from poder, but this is an irregular verb, so that's why it doesn't make a whole lot of sense with what we see here. Okay, so just changes a little bit. Okay, so from poder to podría. Okay, so podría pedirte la cuenta. That's another way for you to ask politely for something. Podría pedirte más servilletas. Could I ask you for more napkins? So this is one fantastic use of the conditional, and again, something that is so common in Mexico. Okay, si tuviera tiempo and si pudiera, they imply a situation that's hypothetical. Okay, so if I had the time or if I could, I would do this. So, si tuviera tiempo, if I had the time, I would eat with you. And si pudiera, if I could, I would live near the sea, close to the sea. So that's something that we use for all of these different situations. As you can see, there is a different ending as well. But unless you are using the hypothetical situations, this is not really something that you're gonna use that often, okay? So that's another thing that you can add to our list. We're almost done here. And for the most part, focus on the conditional ones that are to express polite requests. Podría, could, me gustaría, I would like. What's the other one? Sería. So sería posible. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, those are some of the ones that you can use to ask for something, okay, for a polite request. Okay, and now let's go with the very last one, the subjuntivo that doesn't even exist in English. And it just becomes such a challenge for all of those that only speak English because it's a whole new concept. When and how to use it. Okay, so something that you're gonna use the subjuntivo for is to express a wish, a doubt, an emotion, a recommendation, uncertainty, and anything that is not factual. So, for example, when someone tells you, hope that you have a nice day, I hope that, that you're well. All of these things are not necessarily the present tense, nor the future tense, nor a past tense. These are subjuntivo tenses because they express a wish, or an emotion. So I hope that, or I wish for you that this happens. Something that is so common is that a grandma tells you que te vaya bien or que Dios te bendiga. Something similar to this in English would be may things go well with you or may God bless you. So the may, like this, is in a way something that could be close to what we have here in Spanish, the subjuntivo. So again, you are expressing a hope for someone else. The time markers or triggers are que, just que te vaya bien, for example, que Dios te bendiga, and ojalá que, hopefully, or I hope that, dudo que, I doubt that, quiero que, I want that, es necesario que, it is necessary that, es importante que, it is important that, espero que, I hope that, and quiero que is twice, sorry about that. Okay, now the conjugation is very backwards. So with the regulars, for example, espero que comas rico. I hope that you eat delicious food, for example. Espero que duermas bien. I hope that you sleep well. Ojalá que viajes más este año. So I hope that you eat delicious, delicious food. I hope that you sleep well, and I hope or hopefully you travel more this year. So again, all of these ones are wishes. So if we have comer ending with then it's backwards. So it's going to change for an to an a. Okay, so coma would be for myself, but since we are wishing something to someone else, we're going to use the you conjugation, which would be as, right? So comas, duermas. And then we have viajar, which is to travel, right? And then viajar ends with AR. Therefore, this being backwards, this would end with ES. So viajes. So the examples that we have here, espero que estés bien. I hope that you're well. This is something that you can use for when you're texting someone. If you're writing an email, I hope that you're well. Ojalá que vivamos cerca algún día. Hopefully, or I hope that one day we'll live close to each other or we live nearby. And quiero que hables conmigo. I want you to speak to me. I want you to talk to me. Quiero que hagas más ejercicio. Now, this one would be from hacer. And hacer is an irregular verb, okay? So just a little bit, a little introduction to how they look when they are irregular verbs. For example, vayas. Can you guess which verb is the root? You say ir. You are doing something very well with this whole Spanish thing because it's very regular, okay? So this is the boy one, right? So that's how this one becomes vaya. So it does change a lot, but for the most part, when we have regular conjugations, then it just becomes the opposite. So ar becomes es, hemos, en, and ir becomes a, as, a, amos, and an. Okay, so quiero que, I want you to, quiero que, and now let's use the reflexive verbs. I want you to shower. Quiero que te, that you shower yourself. And bañarse ends with ar, but the opposite of it would be es. So quiero que te bañes. I want you to shower yourself, right? I want you to get up. Quiero que te levantes. Más temprano. I want you to get up earlier. Okay, so this one is more like I want you to, and espero que would be a softer version of that, right? Like I hope that, allowing you more to like allowing more space for the person to decide. This one is more like I want you to. So if you are ever in need to express any of this kind of things like recommendations, doubts, emotions, uncertainty, this is your tense. Something, for example, with recommendations is te recomiendo, to you, I recommend que visites, te recomiendo que visites el Coliseo. I recommend that you visit the Coliseum. Okay, so this is how it works. The subjuntivo is something that you'll hear a lot in the street. Again, when an old little lady wishes you for beautiful things, because they're always so kind and beautiful like that. And when you want to express something to someone, meaning like, I hope that you're well. Espero que estés bien. And this estés bien comes from our verb to be, estar, right? So I hope that you are well. I hope that things are well. Espero que estés bien. Okay, so that would be all for today. It was quite the video. It was a long video today, but hopefully this came together. Hopefully you can also come up with your own examples for the subjuntivo. This being possibly the hardest tense to master. Um, but this is a little introduction to all of it, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful time, and I'll see you whenever you want to start your lessons. So send me a message and we'll keep in touch. Bye bye.